recidivism. Okay, yes. Research indicates that longer prison sentences do not result in the reduction of criminal activity. When possible, jurisdiction should favor alternatives to confinement for both juveniles and adults. Short sentences may be a deterrent. However, a consistent finding is that increases in already lengthy sentences produce at best a very modest deterrent. In developing the sentencing of the incarcerated youth, the Child Justice Guidelines, which was produced by the Office of Children's Advocate, has a list of principles which should guide the treatment of children who are in confinement with the law. For example, vulnerability. Childhood is a particularly vulnerable time, and for that reason, service delivery and treatment of children in the justice system should recognize and be conditioned by that understanding. Best interests of the child. Every child has the right to have his or her best interests given primary consideration in the decisions that affect them. Deprivation of liberty is a last resort. Children should only be deprived of their liberty as an option of last resort and for the minimum period necessary. If and when deprived, primacy is to be given to the rehabilitation and reintegration into society. Hence, our recommendation. We have 5 recommendations, the first of which, the use of effective reintegration programs post-incarceration. The use of restorative justice program and principles to assist with reintegration to combat recidivism. United Nations 2005 noted that the essential aim of the treatment of prisoners shall be their reformation and social rehabilitation. And treatment shall be such as to encourage long-term prisoners' self-respect and to develop their sense of responsibility. 2, the need for true rehabilitation within the prison system. There are social and economic benefits to be obtained if focus is placed on improving the rehabilitation programs within facilities and addressing the psychosocial determinants that contribute to crime and violence. This, therefore, highlights the need to ensure there is a holistic approach to rehabilitation. Effective policing. That is balancing certainty versus severity versus swiftness. Certainty plays a more significant role in deterrence than severity. It is certainty of being caught that deters a person from committing crime, not the fear of being punished or the severity of the punishment. And that was Nagin and also Ritchie. Effective policing that leads to swift and certain but not successful severe sanctions is a better deterrent than the threat of incarceration. Various crime-fighting strategies have been used to help combat crime in our country. Example, the use of community-based policing.
I think I must tell you, it's much more than that. One of these days I will tell you.
Okay. Which did yield positive benefits, which, yes, you will tell us, Minister. And the current use of technology is another example. You know, the Jamaica Eye, which is yielding positive results. Number 4, reformation and rehabilitation. The need for reformation and health supports and developmental services for youths and adults. These would include, but are not limited to, rehabilitative services to be offered during incarceration. Or we might, relook at the current offerings that we have. Procedures to ensure proper reintegration into society at the end of serving their time. Activities the young person must engage in and complete in order to become eligible for parole, and proper program monitoring and evaluation strategies. And lastly, amendments to complementary acts which will address the psychosocial determinants that influence crime and violence. Let me pause here to commend the government to the amendment of the Child Care Protection No. 2 Act. And
you have been listening to parliamentary proceedings.
I have, we have. Develop a holistic trauma-informed approach that is sensitive to traumas faced by offenders in their treatment and rehabilitation. Chair, the views of the Jamaica Psychological Society, and thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much, members. Member.
Chairman,
Yeah,
just a few observations in my mind. Your point 2, the need for true rehabilitation within the prison system. I agree with that. I agree that we need to improve the methodology and how we rehabilitate within the prison system. Point 3, in terms of effective policing. It has always been said that the fear of being caught should be a deterrent, and we need to improve and create that fear. But if you are being caught, you need to be punished. And where I agree with emphasizing in the creation of the minds of criminals that fear of being caught, I am not necessarily in agreement that longer prison sentences do not result in the reduction of criminal activity. And I say it because in the first instance, if you catch a criminal who have committed murder and they are incarcerated, it prevents them from being a repeat offender in the first instance. But if you have indicated in your presentation that there has been research that indicates that, I believe that research would be helpful to the committee to be able to examine what that, and I was looking at your references, and I'm not sure if any of these references points to that research. But it would be important for you, having said to the committee expressively that it does not, then justify that argument by presenting the references of the research to the committee. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Sir, we will be, references, the references highlighted in Nagan. And there is one research as well by Herbert Gale, our very own Herbert Gale, on restorative justice and rehabilitation, which also cites that longer sentencing is a deterrent. Longer prison sentences are not effective in promoting desistance from crime and reducing recidivism. And I am willing to share with you at the end.
Thank you. Other members? Any other questions? Just to indicate to you and others who are present that we thank you for the presentation, and I do feel comfortable with the presentation, I must tell you. For all my sins of the past, I used to lecture on criminology and penology. So, what I'm seeing here is, I'm aware. And indeed, I used to make presentation to judges that sentencing doesn't work. It's a fact of life. Sentencing doesn't. If you say it is deterrent, you can't show necessarily that it works. If you say it is rehabilitation, prisons don't rehabilitate anybody. If you say it is whatever, you get me? So the truth of the matter is, you can't ignore that it is a human process where basically the judge has to look at the circumstances of what is before him or her and try to balance between what has occurred and what may happen to the accused, if whatever sentence is imposed. So that this is where the lawmakers have to try to balance as best as possible the public and reflect the public interest. And sadly, because of the level of criminality in the society and the viciousness, if I might put it this way, the lawmakers can't ignore that the public is really asking for longer, severe sentencing. So I hope, not that we won't take everything you have said into consideration, but at the end of the day, if lawmakers don't balance what the public interest is demanding, then, people will say that we lawmakers are not pursuing justice for the victims or for the defendant, be they children or not. So, these are just my few comments so that when we finally come to a final position, you will understand, not that we haven't taken everything into consideration, but lawmakers have to try and balance and reflect what is in the public interest. Okay? Go ahead.
Just before we close,
and after that,
I would like to go back, if I can, to the public defender in seeking clarity on something she would have said. Public defender, I would want to direct you to your 15, where you had suggested again a relook on Section 6 of the Parole Act. And you would have referenced the length of time that criminals would be incarcerated, being extensive. Are you suggesting that the relook on Section 6 would be the qualifying period for eligibility for parole?
Yes.
And would that be prescribed with adding any other provisions to that? Not only the qualifying period, but merit in terms of behavior?
Just so that in terms of considering the Parole Act and in considering the other the amendments, that they are in tandem, that they are walking hand in hand, because you could not have a scheme where it is possible, for example, to be approaching for parole after year 10, and you have a sentence of 45 years. Perhaps I have not given a proper example, but the only objective that I have is so that the two pieces of legislation, or the 4 pieces of legislation, walk together.
It's an alignment.
Yes.
Got you.
Thank you, Senator McCann.
Thank you.
So, sorry, you wanted to add something, Children's Advocate? Just hold a second, please, Senator Golden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, since we were having a relook, we were having discussions among ourselves, sotto voce, while the presentations were going on. And I just wanted to comment very briefly on the issue that has been put on the table about redefining who a child is. I noted here with my colleagues that the Juvenile Act, which had that kind of, segmented distinctions, has been repealed for good reason. And I think that if we were to try to redefine or interfere with the definition of who a child is, it would disturb the various commitments that we have made in the international arena and the conventions to which we have signed that really sees universally in perhaps most of the countries worldwide that a child is someone under 18. So I would say that I quite like, as I indicated to the public defender, the submissions made by the office, save and except for that little bit. And so I certainly would want to comment as children's advocate that I am for the non-interference with the definition of who a child is for a number of reasons. So just wanted to have that considered by the committee.
Thank you, children's advocate. Senator Golden.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask you before I pose my question. The Department of Corrections, are they going to be presenting to us? Or I had missed a meeting.
Not to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. Okay. So thank you all. I pick up pretty much from everybody who was presented today that one of the sticking points presenters have is the question of the rehabilitation of child offenders, and I like to confront the elephant in the room because that's an elephant. I don't know that as a committee member I sort of have a clear understanding of what the rehabilitative mechanisms are for children, for child offenders. And I must say, Mr. Chairman, that when I look at the statistics, the data that was provided by the Court Administration Division indicating that between 2016 and 2022, the matters in the courts in relation to child offenders really amounted to just 3% of the matters, that I'm having some mathematics difficulties in my mind from a policy perspective. But the question, the backdrop of all of this for me, and I appreciate the learning that has been shared in terms of how sentencing affects children from a deterrent perspective. But another elephant in the room for me is this, that when we pull those kinds of research, how many of those jurisdictions, any of your knowledge, where else is there a place like Jamaica in relation to the crime levels that we are experiencing and the societal and social difficulties? I know I've seen similar numbers in war-torn countries, but in a country that is supposedly living in a peaceful time, where else have you seen the crime matrix that we have here? Thank you.
Dr. Shetty wanted to... Yes.
Mexico, for example, they have kids drawn into the mafias and turned into soldiers for the Don. And they have used multi-systemic treatment for antisocial behavior successfully, which is a robust evidence-based intervention which includes family, the offender, as well as the whole community and school. And it has saved money and also has reduced reoffending. So it's something we need to learn from.
And that, Dr. Shetty, has yielded positive outcomes?
Yes. And also I wanted to make one more point. Definitely long sentencing might deter some persons, but we need to understand those who commit murder. And in one of the research we did downtown, 1 out of 3 children going to school normally had post-traumatic stress disorder. And there are 2 things which post-traumatic stress disorder does to the people. One, it makes them emotionally numb or emotionally dead. so they don't feel anything, good, bad, or in between. And two, they have a sense of foreshortened future. Just to give an example, this teenage boy with a gun held up a taxi guy, and he said something like, I don't plan to live up to age 21. Whatever I need to get it now. So when that is the outcome, because I've seen so many people dying around them, going to jail, spending 20 years, how deterrent it could be. But at the same time, I do appreciate there should be a balance. I'm a family member of a person who was murdered. It was a contract killing. And she left her husband and a 6-year-old child. And like every relative, I pray to God that the culprit should be punished, maybe killed. And in fact, for his bad deed, he was killed in a short order. But then there was this disappointment that it was too easy. One gunshot, dead. Maybe he should have been in the prison for a long time and gone through some rigorous labor, and the money from that should be sent to the child's school for fees, because she was left with mother who was the bread, without mother.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I must admit that the gap that I'm having just in listening to the presentations, I think would be filled by the Department of Corrections. I really would appreciate a clear understanding of what is the journey of a child offender from the point of conviction and then sentencing through the system. I really don't have the experience of understanding that.
I think you're more concerned with those children who have been put in children's institutions.
I don't know, Mr. Chairman, because what I'm understanding the children's advocate saying is that there are instances when, in fact, when the child is sentenced as an adult, and so are those children at that time going into children's homes, or are they being put into an adult population facility? I'm not clear. I'm not clear.
Go ahead, children.
I would appreciate
the children advocate will respond.
All right. So, of course, Mr. Chair, I do not speak on behalf of the Department of Correctional Services, but just to say that once a child is in conflict with the law, that is one who has been charged and tried as an offender and convicted, the children's home places of safety option is completely off the table. They're sent to a juvenile correctional facility, or, depending on the length of the sentence, they can be sent to an adult facility. Sometimes as well, if the crime is one that has them acting in joint enterprise and they're indicted with an adult and convicted as such, then there is that discretion as well for them to be sentenced in big people prison, so to speak. So it really depends on the circumstances and what obtains based on the particular case that's at bar.
Chairman, there has been, and since Member Golding had raised the issue, there has been a common thread around these presentations representing rehabilitation. And it would be good for us as a committee to understand the extent of strategies that are being deployed through these various institutions around rehabilitations. I think it would be important for us as a committee and for the, for the wider public to have an appreciation.
I understand, Senator Gale. I have a strong feeling, though, that that is something that another parliamentary committee could look at in terms of the prison system and correction, because I am not denying that it has an impact here. But I'm not too sure if we invited the correctional department to speak on it, if it would affect.
Well, here where I would go as a recommendation, having identified that it would have been represented here, maybe we could make that recommendation that another committee examines this, coming out of this. Because we may not want to detain ourselves in treating with that. It's not one of our specific objectives, but we could make a recommendation.
I think you're right. I think you're right, because there
Mr. Chairman, can I just interrupt you a moment? Because I didn't ask the question to set about on a journey of fixing the correctional services. I, as a member of this committee, do not understand the protocols of the correctional service in relation to child offenders, and it's something I would wish to understand as I deliberate on these bills before us. So my request was not for us to embark on any amendments to the correctional plan,
they're useful,
but just to understand, and it can be something that can really be done by just a written document to us. I'm not necessarily asking for a presentation.
Since the public defender and the children's advocate are here, I'm going to ask both of them if they could identify anyone who could give us a synopsis as to what takes place with children who are sentenced by the court. Okay? In other words, who could come and present to us, you know, who would have that knowledge of, say, the juvenile institutions, and what happened, or do we have any records of, you know, juveniles who have been sentenced by the court? I don't know. I'm hoping children's advocate and public defender, you can be in touch and let me know who we could invite to make such a presentation. Okay?
We certainly can, Mr. Chair, and just off the top of my head, the Department of Correctional Services would be certainly a good place to start. And I can also say that through the Office of the Children's Advocate or Investigations, Inspections and Compliance Unit, we do have some knowledge as well as to what obtains, so we could be of assistance perhaps through a written document.
So it's something we can contemplate and see, Senator Gold, and if there's any further consideration from that aspect. Well, I think thank you, the presenters and everyone who are present today, the technical team, the presenters, members. We are going to adjourn. Just to confirm that we started out without a quorum, and we just confirmed that what we did before the quorum, we just ratified. So moved? All right. And we are planning to meet again on the 12th and 19th of September, subject to confirmation, okay? When we hope on the 12th we will hear any of the final one or two submission, 10 o'clock in the morning. And hopefully we'll start the clause by clause, and hopefully on the 19th we would finish, okay? So I want to thank members and everyone present today and wish you all the best for the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
But we're also looking at the national level where it's going to be a model farm where we're using the permaculture design. So farmers and other community members could come in and learn. It's going to be a research institute. They're going to learn what are the practices that are happening there, particularly permaculture design, and find ways to integrate these practices into their own local community or within their own farm. So it's really going to be an excellent learning institution